Hello, welcome back to SCI Teach. This is a chapter by chapter summary of the Jamb novel, The Lekki Headmaster. This is not me reading the text to you, this is me narrating the story chapter by chapter to you. So, after listening to everything here, you might have known, you might have had a general knowledge of the story. But you would still need to read the story to know the little details that accompanies the main idea. But listening to this to the end gives you a general complete knowledge of what the story is all about. In chapter 1, we can see that the assembly at Stardom schools began on a very optimistic note, with students and staff eagerly listening to Iken Naibu, who was an SS1 student, narrating his memorable experience from a recent excursion to Jos. So now his passionate account of Jos' beauty and cultural richness captivated everyone, and that set a cheerful atmosphere in the school assembly. Now, following this, the principal, Mr. Beppo Adewale, was expected to give his normal, inspiring address, but something was off. So as Mr. Beppo approached the podium, his usual charisma was absent. So he appeared withdrawn, and instead of speaking, he stood in silence, staring blankly above the crowd. So when he finally tried to talk, no words came. So to everyone's shock, tears began streaming down his face, and he dropped the microphone, unable to compose himself. Staff, led by Vice Principal Mrs. Grace Ape, quickly intervened, helping him back to his office as he continued to sob uncontrollably. Okay, so teachers and staff tried consoling him, but the principal remained silent, occasionally shaking his head and shedding more tears. The unusual scene caused concern among parents who began calling the school for updates. So the vice principal eventually contacted the managing director, Mrs. Ibedun Gloss, who rushed to the school to address the situation. So we see from this chapter that the emotional episode unfolded against the backdrop of school known for its excellence and innovative policies, which had recently improved punctuality and boarding services. Yet the beloved principal, who was a pillar of the institution for over 24 years, was overwhelmed by an undisclosed distress, which casted a shadow over what should have been a regular, upbeat school day. In chapter 2, we see that after 5 days of persistent questioning, Mr. Beppo finally revealed the source of his distress. He was relocating to the United Kingdom. Now, his decision had not been easy. As a dedicated educator and principal at Stardom schools for over 20 years, he had built a strong bond with his students and cherished the impact he had made in their lives. Leaving them behind in Nigeria, a country he deeply loved, weighed heavily on him. So he could not reconcile the idea of abandoning his role in shaping the younger generation in a developing nation to become part of a system that further advanced an already developed country. So, however, family pressures had grown unbearably. His wife, Seri, and their two daughters, Nike and Kike, had already moved to the UK and were urging him to join them. So his reluctance to leave had strained his marriage to the breaking point. To save his family, he reluctantly decided to quit his position at Stardom. Fortunately, he had secured a teaching job in the UK, which promised better pay and opportunities for his family. His colleagues at Stardom were even baffled by his reluctance to embrace what they saw as a golden opportunity. With his wife earning up to 10,000 euros per month And the new job he is offered in the UK promised 3,600 euros monthly. And this financial benefit far exceeds his current 400,000 naira salary. So many envy this position, even joking about the sacrifices people made to move abroad. The fine arts teacher, Mr. Audu, humorously declared his intent to even replace Mr. Beppo by proposing to Seri, that's the wife of Mr. Beppo, sparking laughter among the staff. They could not understand why Beppo, with such a promising future, remained so conflicted. For Beppo, the move was not just about financial gain. He had long dreamed of retiring at 55 and starting his own business or school in Nigeria. He envisioned himself contributing to the country's development by creating jobs, fostering education, and empowering others. His past attempts to establish a school after his National Youth Service had failed due to economic challenges, but he still hoped to revisit that dream one day. He also explored other entrepreneurial ventures like farming and transportation, but remained very wary of the risk involved. So, despite his inner turmoil, Beppo understood the need to prioritize his family. He prepared to leave behind his beloved Stardom schools, where he had earned the nickname the Lekki Headmaster for his because of his emphatic leadership and memorable ability to resolve conflicts. He acknowledged that his life in the UK would not be without challenges, including adjusting to a new teaching environment and cultural differences. But he was determined to navigate these obstacles for the sake of his family and their shared future. So, as he prepared for this new chapter, Beppo reflected on his legacy and lessons he had learned. While he felt sorrow leaving the Stardom, he hoped to bring the same passion for education and mentorship to his new role abroad, knowing that every new beginning required courage and sacrifice. In chapter 3, the narrative delves into the increasing wave of migration from Nigeria, which is widely referred to as Japa, which is a movement driven by individuals seeking better lives abroad. Over the years, this, Japa has affected people across various professions, especially nurses, doctors, and other health workers who are often considered well paid but still live in droves. Even government records show that the gravity of the situation, which, in the records we have that up to 1,000 out of 3,000 doctors leave the country yearly. Now, beyond health professions, the migration trend also includes graduates, many of whom claim to pursue master's degrees as a way of relocating. So the lure of education visas, which permits students to travel with their spouses and children, has made relocating appealing. So desperation to migrate has led many to sell everything they own, houses, land, cars, and furniture, to fund the process. Others resort to dubious methods, including selling items that don't belong to them or taking loans they never intend to repay. For instance, Beppo, an educator at this Stardom school, recalls cases like that of Mr. Nku, who took 2 million naira loan and fled the country 2 days later. Similarly, a school driver attempted to steal a bus, confessing that he planned to sell it to fund his son's education abroad. While some eventually repaid their loans after settling abroad, others abandoned their obligations entirely, earning a reputation as rogue migrants. Now, the story also sheds light on Shola, who was a former home economics teacher at Stardom School. Now, she migrated to the UK under the guise of a sick leave, and she and her husband sold all their belongings and borrowed 4 million naira to finance their move. Despite initial struggles, Shola had no regrets, citing better paying job opportunities and improved living conditions in the UK. She shares her experience with Beppo explaining how the infrastructure, healthcare, and free education for children makes the sacrifice worthwhile. For example, her asthmatic daughter, Betty, once received rapid emergency care that left Shola in tears of gratitude. So even simple moments like Betty's birthday celebration in the hospital reinforce the human aspect of the UK's healthcare system. Okay, so in this chapter, you see that it, it's just a narration of how migration, the effects of migration, the good and the bad. As you can see, the good, there are still bad ones. So migration is not without its challenges. For many, life abroad is not the bed of roses they imagined. So some migrants find themselves stranded, unable to secure decent jobs, while others struggle with the demanding nature of work. For instance, in the text, Jare, a former banker, broke down in tears when faced with the reality of caring for an elderly couple in London. In some cases, the pressure of migration causes relationships to crumble. Hope, an accountant, relocated with his wife to study for a master's degree, but his wife stopped supporting him financially within months, leaving him stranded. Despite appeals to her family, she refused to resume her support, citing the demands of her job. Now, such cases illustrate how relocation, while promising, can unravel under unforeseen pressures. So, the narrative also explores the contrast between success stories and cautionary tales. Rike, a woman who relocated to the US, bought two houses in Nigeria within 3 years, showcasing the potential rewards of migration. But on the other hand, a Nigerian academic who spent 20 years in the US returned home empty handed, stripped of all he owned after his wife legally exploited him in a bitter divorce. So, similarly, Akindele, a 55-year-old migrant in the US, highlights the struggles of working abroad, recounting his grueling job as a correctional officer. He explains that many older Nigerians, including retired professionals, end up taking casual jobs in malls or factories to survive, as every dollar earned abroad comes with hard work. Despite these challenges, two major factors continue to drive migration: superior infrastructure and access to quality education for children. So, in developed countries like the UK and the US, children often enjoy free primary and secondary education, as well as affordable healthcare. These benefits starkly contrast with the struggles of many Nigerian parents who battle high private school fees and inadequate public facilities. For instance, Chief Waliem, who was a wealthy parent who heavily funded social programs at Stardom School, left his children stranded after his sudden death. This revealed his heavy indebtedness to banks. Many less privileged parents also pulled their children out of school during economic downturns, highlighting the systemic issues in Nigeria that fuel the desire for migration. So you are paying great attention because I'm highlighting the different themes involved in this chapter. Okay, so the narrative concludes with a reflection on the unpredictability of life abroad. While some thrive and build wealth, others face, disillusionment or unexpected hardships. So this chapter emphasizes that success or failure in migration is not guaranteed and depends on various factors, including planning, support systems, and individual circumstances. So as Beppo reflects, life's outcomes are as diverse as the sugarcane and bitter leaf, both nurtured by the same rain but yielding vastly different tastes. So in chapter 4, Beppo, the principal of Stardom School, was about to pray at night when a late night call disrupted his routine. The caller was Mrs. Ignatius, a parent whose overfamiliarity had increasingly tested Mr. Beppo's patience. So she cried out in distress, explaining that her husband, Mr. Ignatius, had not returned home and may never come back. So although Beppo initially dismissed her concerns, he soon realized that her family was grappling with a profound crisis. So what happened? The Ignatius family had been preparing to relocate to the UK, which was driven by the father's conviction that their children deserved better opportunities in a stable Western environment. So Mr. Ignatius, who was a high-earning oil company manager, had embraced the Japa ideology. Mrs. Ignatius, the wife, who was eager to support the move, trained as a hairdresser and tailor so she could adapt to life in the UK. So their dreams seemed within reach until the visa application process revealed a shocking secret. And what was that? One of their children, Favor, was not biologically Mr. Ignatius' daughter. So this revelation devastated the family. Mr. Ignatius felt betrayed and insisted that Favor and the mother, Mrs. Ignatius, should leave and go and stay with Favor's biological father. Although Mrs. Ignatius denied ever cheating on her husband, the husband refused to believe her. Their son, Iye, began to suspect something was amiss, especially after he researched for the reasons why families might face visa bans or denials. So although Favor was not aware of the DNA issue, her brother was asking questions, and these questions heightened the tension in the household. So as Mrs. Ignatius vented her fears to Beppo over the phone, the principal struggled to empathize because he was, equally burdened by his own challenges at Stardom School. So Stardom School was a prestigious institution that was filled with high maintenance parents and their children. So over the years, Beppo had learned that running an elite school demands balancing humor, discipline, and patience. Because, some parents are wealthy yet considerate, while others are wealthy and insufferable. So despite his frustrations, Beppo was also preparing for his own move abroad and was reflecting on how his experiences at Stardom might help shape his new career. So Mrs. Ignatius was not the only parent whose actions disrupted the smooth running of the school. So Beppo recalls a previous incident involving Mrs. Ladele, who was another parent, and her young daughter, Bibi. This Bibi late one night woke her mother in terror, claiming to have been haunted by the ghost of her government teacher, Mr. Yesoro, in her dreams. Imagine. So, because the school, Stardom School, was concerned about losing this government teacher's family to another private school, the management had to transfer Mr. Yesoro to another branch of Stardom schools. So, Beppo reflected on all these incidents and was pondering how the unique challenges of his new job, of his job, have shaped him. So he dreams of writing a book about his experiences one day, hoping the insight he has gained at Stardom will serve him well in his next chapter of life. But for now, he silently endured the late night interruptions, knowing that they are just part of the trials of being a principal. Chapter 5 is a little digression from the story of Beppo's migration, that's his future. It's a little bit settled on the present. So we are seeing him in Stardom School again, living the life. So the long break at Stardom School was always a lively and energetic time. Children in both the primary and secondary sections of the school were buzzing with excitement, taking full advantage of the break to play with their peers. But despite the fact that it was time to eat, the students were always eager to engage in playful activities. So this chaotic energy was carefully monitored by Principal Beppo and the teachers on duty. They moved around the school, ensuring that the students engaged in safe play, as there had been instances in the past where students had broken their arms or injured themselves during dangerous activities. So, this level of vigilance had become necessary to avoid any such incidents. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ibedun Gloss, that's the managing director, you remember from chapter 1 of Stardom School, had just finished her lunch and was seeking a bit of solitude in her office. Her office was spacious and well equipped, offering a refuge from the bustling school environment. However, her retreat was not only a break from work, it was also a necessary moment to rest due to a health condition she had struggled with for many years. For over 30 years, she had been battling a chronic issue with her buttocks that caused intense pain whenever she sat for long periods. Despite having sought various treatments, including medical care both in Nigeria and abroad, and even exploring spiritual and traditional methods, none had provided lasting relief. As a result, Mrs. Gloss had learned to live with the discomfort, which, while not, debilitating, reminded remained a constant challenge. Having spent some time resting in her office, Mrs. Gloss decided to take a short walk around the school's premises to clear her head. She was unaware that this decision would lead her to uncover something troubling about the school's operations. As she headed towards the back gates, the two security guards on duty, Jumbo and his colleague, had stood at attention and opened the gate for her. They offered to accompany her, but she requested that one of them remained at their post while the other accompanied her. Her walk took her to a piece of land the school had acquired 2 years prior. The land was only about 5 minutes away from the back gate, and it was enclosed by a fence. To Mrs. Gloss's surprise, as she approached the land, she noticed that it was filled with cars, several different makes and models, none of them new, but clearly in use. The sight of many cars on a property that had been meant for other purposes left her perplexed. So when she asked the security guard Jumbo about the cars, he revealed that they belonged to some of the school staff members, particularly the teachers. Mrs. Gloss, already taken aback, grew even more confused. She knew there was a designated staff parking area on the school grounds. So why would so many staff members park their cars here? Jumbo tried to explain that not all staff members brought their cars into the school, which further deepened the mystery for Mrs. Gloss. As she inspected the vehicles, she noted that there were cars of various makes: Toyota, Hyundai, Mazda, and even a large Toyota that some drivers called Muscle. In addition to the personal cars, there were two buses parked at the far end of the lot, one of which was white, while the other was painted in the familiar yellow color associated with the Lagos public transportation. Mrs. Gloss began to worry that some staff members might be engaging in public transportation activities without the school's knowledge. The more she surveyed the parking lot, the more anxious she became, feeling as though the school's financial management might be compromised. She immediately called Principal Beppo and the school's accountant, Jeremy Amos, to come and explain the situation. When they arrived, Mrs. Gloss, visibly upset, demanded to know how it was possible for so many staff members to afford such cars. She was especially perplexed by the fact that the staff cars appeared to be expensive and in good condition, which seemed, incongruent with the salaries most teachers earned. Principal Beppo and the accountant tried to reassure her that the school's finances were intact. Jeremy explained that many of the teachers had taken out loans, some through personal means, while a significant number of them had purchased their vehicles through the school's cooperative society. The cooperative provided loans to staff members, which were then repaid through automatic salary deductions. Although this information somewhat calmed Mrs. Gloss, it also raised new concerns. She could not understand how the cooperative's fund could be large enough to support so many staff members in purchasing such costly items. Now, with the cooperative holding 95 million in its account and over 50 million loaned out to staff members, Mrs. Gloss began to worry that the school might be unknowingly funding these lavish purchases, potentially jeopardizing its financial stability. The next day, Mrs. Gloss called an emergency meeting with the board of directors, which included her mother, Chief Mrs. Solapo Bayo, her brother, Martins Bayo, and her younger sibling, Oye Bayo, the secretary of the board. The MD requested detailed financial records from both the accountant and the principal, wanting to understand the extent of the cooperative's financial activities. In the meeting, the figures were revealed. 95 million in the cooperative account, with more than half of it loaned out to staff. The board was alarmed by the scale of the financial operations within the cooperative, and Chief Bayo expressed concern over the potential consequences if the staff were to rebel and establish a competing school using the funds they had accumulated. The idea of losing control over the school's brand and ideals deeply worried the board members. So, to prevent such a situation, the board unanimously agreed on a new policy for the cooperative. Moving forward, no staff member would be allowed to borrow more than 250,000 from the cooperative. Additionally, any loan request would require the MD's approval, and the management would be informed of all cooperative elections. This decision aimed to curb the financial autonomy the cooperative had gained and to ensure that the school's leadership retained control over its financial and operational activities. So, the event unfolded as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked financial practices and the risks posed by a large independent financial entity within an institution. So, Mrs. Gloss, while attempting to ensure the prosperity of Stardom School, now had to navigate the challenges posed by the cooperative's rapid growth and its potential to undermine the school's leadership. So the story painted a picture of the complexities of managing a successful institution, balancing staff welfare with the institution's financial health, and the delicate, dynamics of power and control in a corporate environment. So chapter 6 continues to narrate Mr. Beppo um, in Stardom schools, and it's focusing now on the pen days. Pen days were an essential part of the academic year. These days provided an opportunity for the management to update parents on their children's academic progress and for teachers to engage directly with parents. So the event was highly anticipated, and prior to each pen day, a staff meeting would take place. Teachers and non-academic staff were aware of the expectations. It was a day when they needed to present their best selves, especially since they would have personal encounters with parents. So Stardom had a reputation for encouraging and sometimes enforcing a strict dress code for their teachers, with some even being fired for failing to comply with these standards. As a result, the teachers were motivated to dress professionally. At the end of each session, the best dressed teacher was awarded a prize, reinforcing the emphasis on appearance and presentation. The day held particularly significance for the staff, especially teachers, as it not only allowed them to engage with parents, but also served as a reminder that their hard work could be recognized and rewarded. It was a moment of validation, And for some, it provided tangible rewards. Some parents, particularly those like Mrs. Nike Bavi, would bring gifts for the staff, especially class teachers, often in the form of cash or items. So the Bavi family stood out, with Mrs. Nike generously gifting the schools packets of beverages as her husband worked for a leading beverage company. However, Pen Days was, not without its challenges. Teachers often dreaded it because it was also a time when parents would voice their complaints. If a teacher had made an error, either unintentionally or deliberately, they could be confronted by an angry parent. Such complaints often led to uncomfortable moments for the staff, and teachers dreaded the possibility of facing a parent's wrath. Now, Mr. Beppo was a senior staff member, recounted one particularly tense moment. He had been summoned to the MD's office by Mrs. Ibidum Gloss, the school's MD, where a parent named Mr. Guta was waiting. So Guta, a father of two students at the school, had come to express his displeasure over a mistake he had found in his son's notebook. The mistake, which was a minor grammatical error, was enough to provoke his ire. Mrs. Gloss demanded to know where Fafore, the English teacher responsible for the error, was, and Beppo knew that he would soon have to deal with the fallout from this situation. No, for Mr. Beppo, having to issue a sack letter for was one of the most difficult parts of his job. While the management rarely dismissed anyone directly, they often tasked Beppo with carrying out the difficult responsibility of letting staff members go. So he hated the process, especially when it involved the teachers who were, in his own view, not truly deserving of being fired. So he recalled occasions when he had to dismiss colleagues for serious offenses, such as um, altering student results or engaging in child abuse. But there were also instances when teachers lost their jobs over what seemed to be minor issues, or worse, mere misunderstandings, or conspiracies. So, regardless of the reason, people always felt conflicted about firing a colleague, particularly when the teacher was a family man. So his own past experience with unemployment made him empathetic toward those in similar circumstances. So Beppo's memory drifted back to a time when he was out of a job and had to endure the humiliation of struggling to make ends meet. One particular desperate day, he had taken the electricity tariff money he collected from his tenants and spent it, later lying that he had remitted the funds. His lie was exposed when the electricity company, disconnected the power to the building, and his tenants, furious at his dishonesty, mocked and berated him. Now, the situation reached its peak when one of the tenants, Mrs. Adio, threw a ball of cassava powder at his head, humiliating him further. This incident left a lasting impression on Beppo, reminding him of how low he had fallen and how hard it was to face such public ridicule. So, back in the present, Fafore, the English teacher, was summoned to the principal's office after the MD's confrontation. He had arrived at school early that day, as was his habit, but little did he know that the complaints from Mr. Guta, who had found a grammatical mistake in his teaching, would soon lead to a crisis. Fafore, despite his reputation for punctuality and commitment, now faced the possibility of losing his job due to what seemed like a minor oversight. The issue at hand revolved around the grammatical mistake in the student's notebook, where Fafore had written Ade as well as Jide comes early instead of Ade as well as Jide come early. The MD was furious and decided that Fafore's mistake was serious enough to warrant dismissal. She believed that such incompetence was unacceptable in a school where parents paid high fees for quality education. The parents were expected to receive the best education for their children. And a mistake like this, in her view, was inexcusable. Fafore, who was known for his punctuality and dedication, found himself in a difficult position. He had always arrived at school early, despite living far from the school in Ifo, an area in Ogun State. He had a family to support and had made significant sacrifices to ensure that he could be on time for his students. He had even gone so far as to rent a house in Sango, a considerable distance from Lagos, so that he could save on rent and be close to his place of work. However, his personal circumstances were not enough to protect him from the scrutiny of the management. So the MD's decision to dismiss Fafore was met with resistance from the principal, who defended Fafore's use of the subjunctive mood in the sentence. The principal explained that the construction of the sentence was grammatically sound and that the use of the singular verb comes was correct when paired with as well as. The matter quickly escalated when the staff decided to investigate the issue online, and it was confirmed that the principal's explanation was correct. The MD, in her frustration, had wrongly assumed that Favore had made a significant mistake, leading to the potential firing of a teacher who was actually in the right. The situation became tense as the MD, realizing his error, was left to face the consequences of her actions. While some teachers sympathized with her, others were critical of how she had handled the situation, with many feeling that the issue could have been resolved privately. So the awkward silence in the room was eventually broken by Mr. Audu, who um, lightened the mood with a humorous comment. He acknowledged that both Fafore and the principal were correct, and that the MD was pardoned, discharged, and acquitted from her earlier statements. The room erupted in laughter at Audu's playful intervention, which, of course, helped ease the tension. However, the underlying message was clear. In a school where job security was fragile and the management had a tendency to act impulsively, teachers had to be vigilant and always prepared for the unexpected. So the staff realized that no one's position was actually guaranteed, and the fate of any teacher could change with the whim of the management. In the end, Fafare was not dismissed, and the MD's rash decision was reversed. However, the incident left a lasting impression on the staff, underscoring the precarious nature of their jobs at Stardom and the unpredictable environment in which they worked. The teachers continued their work, but with a heightened awareness that their positions could be jeopardized at any moment, often due to factors beyond their control. So the lesson was clear. In a school like Stardom, even the most minor errors could have far reaching consequences. And teachers had to navigate a delicate balance between, meeting the expectations of the management and satisfying the often critical parents. So, chapter 7 focuses on Beppo's time before he joined Stardom School. So, Beppo joined Stardom School after experiencing a tumultuous period at Beesway Group of Schools, a school located on the outskirts of Lagos. Now, his time at Beesway became um, marked by an ongoing dispute with the school's management, which began when he noticed a grammatical error in the name of the school. As a senior English teacher, Beppo pointed out that the name should be Beesway Group of Schools rather than Group of School. Now, his reasoning was based on grammatical principles, Group of implies the existence of more than one entity. Thus, the use of the singular noun school was not correct. He compared it to saying a group of man instead of a group of men, or a bevy of bird instead of bevy of birds. So, despite his well-meaning correction, the director of the school, Mr. Egimeko, was not receptive. He feigned ignorance about the grammatical issue, choosing to humor Beppo while undermining the importance of such concerns. Instead, Mr. Meko argued that the school's name had spiritual significance and that changing it would go against something divine, something that he believed was essential to the success of the institution. Beppo, however, persisted, trying to make his point known, but the director was dismissive and the issue was ultimately swept aside. The situation became even more frustrating when Beppo raised the matter during a parent-teacher association meeting, where parents echoed his concerns about the school's name. The director's reaction was swift and furious. He accused Beppo of causing unnecessary trouble, suspecting that he had spoken to the parents about the issue. Beppo vehemently denied these accusations and swore to his crucifix, a personal symbol of his truthfulness. But the director remained, unconvinced and gave him an ultimatum: either stop criticizing the name or leave the school. This created a profound dilemma for Beppo. He felt torn between his professional integrity as an English teacher and his desire to maintain peace at work. Ultimately, after being confronted in this way, Beppo chose to leave the school. He felt that he could no longer work in an environment where his expertise and values are not respected. Upon his departure, Beppo reflected on his spiritual life as well. His wife had previously, convinced him to join her Pentecostal church, but after she relocated to the UK, he reverted to his Catholic faith, where he felt more at home. Now, despite these personal beliefs, he remained a firm believer in quality education and wanted to contribute to a learning environment where knowledge was valued over spiritual or superstitious claims. The most bizarre and shocking event of Pepper's time at Beesway happened one night when he witnessed a mysterious and unsettling ritual. Unable to sleep, he went to his window to get some fresh air. What he saw out in the dark school compound puzzled him. A group of men, including the director, were gathered around a cow. Now, as Beppo watched in confusion, he saw them, preparing to bury the cow alive. When he approached them, the director and his accomplices became hostile and threatened him with violence. Beppo was struck on his wrist with a club, and after a brief struggle, he was forced back to his room. Left to contemplate the strange event, the director later explained that it was part of a prayer ritual for his late father, but Beppo was skeptical and disturbed by what he had witnessed. This bizarre experience lingered in Beppo's mind as he pondered the possible occult practices that some school owners or business people may engage in, especially when seeking success at any cost. His reflections were reinforced when he recalled a previous experience at a small school he had co-founded with a colleague, Fruitful Future School. They had rejected an offer from a parent who suggested using ritualistic means, such as sprinkling corn around the school to boost enrollment. Beppo and his partner believed in the power of education, good teaching practices, and community engagement to ensure the school's growth. However, despite their best efforts, Fruitful Future School did not survive. The area fell into neglect, and their efforts to improve the school were thwarted by a lack of support and resources. Beppo's professional journey continued. but the moral dilemmas he faced at Bisway lingered. Years later, he learned that the same parents who had once offered a ritualistic solution to increase enrollment at his school, Mr. Ogo, was involved in a gruesome crime. He had murdered a woman who sought spiritual help from him regarding um, infertility. That's the Mr. Ogo um, murdered this woman. This revelation deeply troubled people, especially as it reminded him of the dark practices he had witnessed firsthand. Despite the unsettling events, Beppo ultimately chose not to report the director to the authorities. He was unsure if he had enough resources to take on such a powerful figure. And the responsibility of a drawn out legal battle, coupled with the director's influence, made him hesitant. But nonetheless, Beppo continued to reflect on the bizarre and troubling events at Bisway, his own journey in education, and the ethical dilemmas that shaped his career. Before leaving Bisway, Beppo packed up his belongings as he had decided that the time he had come to an end. So it's time to move on. The director apologized for the earlier incident, but Beppo remained skeptical about the explanations provided. He was done with the school, but the disturbing memories would haunt him for years to come, serving as a cautionary tale about the intersection of education, ethics, and the darker side of human ambition. In chapter 8, we see that Stardom Schools was proud of its democratic traditions, creating a system where students could actively participate in leadership selection and various school activities. But however, an unexpected incident on speech day in which emotions flared severely disrupted this tradition, leading to its eventual suspension. The event that sparked the breakdown occurred when Banki, a candidate from SS2 running for the post of social prefect, became visibly emotional during his campaign speech. In a moment of frustration, Banki resorted to insulting his primary rival, Tosh, who also was an SS2 student, but by using harsh and arguably vulgar language. He famously said, "Instead of voting for the son of an ex-convict, cast your vote for me. You will never regret it." The audience responded with cheers as Banki concluded his speech, seemingly caught up in the drama of the moment. However, things quickly took a turn when the principal, Beppo, rose from his seat at the officiating table. His face was filled with disappointment as he addressed Banki's choices of words. Specifically, he condemned the public attack on Tosh's father, who was accused of being an ex-convict. Before Beppo could intervene and calm the situation, Tosh, who was deeply offended, stood up from his seat and began stomping out of the hall in anger. Despite efforts from three teachers to bring him back, Tosh was determined and resisted the attempts. So his departure stirred further protests from his supporters, who called for the cancellation of the event until Tosh was brought back into the hall. So as the students attempted to, mediate, the situation became increasingly tense. The principal sternly reprimanded Banki for his comments, stating that attacking a fellow student's family in such a manner was morally unacceptable. But the issue ran much deeper than just a misstep in language. Banki, you see, and Tosh had a long history of rivalry that had been, simmering for years. Their feud went back to when they were in JS3, competing for title of Best Dancer during the end of the year party. Both boys were, finalists in the highly contesting hip hop dance category. Their performances were so closely matched that the audience was divided over who had won. After a tense deliberation, the judges awarded the title to Banki with a narrow 3-2 vote. So Tosh's family, particularly his mother, felt their son had been unfairly treated and strongly protested the decision. Tosh's mother even wrote an official complaint accusing the judges of bias. The situation escalated further as the mothers clashed during a PTA meeting, and the tension between the two families reached a boiling point. Also, the rivalry was further complicated by the political affiliations of both boys' fathers. Tosh's father, with Chief Digioba, was a prominent political figure with, you know, a background in law. Although he had once faced legal troubles, including a 3-year detention related to an alleged misappropriation of substantial government contract, he was eventually cleared of all charges and released. The case, which had dragged on for years, ended with a ruling that Oba's company was guilty of financial mismanagement, but Oba himself was not personally culpable. However, Tosh family still resented the way their family had been portrayed in public, especially after Banki's speech. So because of this little time, um, the Tosh family or Tosh father spent with the law, having these contract issues, Banki used that against Tosh in his political speech. So, in response to Banki's comments, Chief Oba, who was also a highly influential lawyer, demanded a public apology from Banki and his parents. He insisted that Banki's family should write separate letters of apology and that these letters be published in the school magazine for everyone to see. Banki's parents, however, rejected the demand, arguing that Banki never directly mentioned Tosh's father by name. Their lawyer reviewed the video of Banki's speech and concluded that no reference to Oba was made. Thus, the accusation of slander was unfounded. Furthermore, Banki's family viewed Chief Oba's demands as a form of victimization, designed to punish their son for what they saw as innocent misstep in a heated moment. So, as the disputes continued to unfold, Beppo, who was close to both families, the principal was close to both family of Banki and Tosh, he tried to act as a mediator. He had hoped to, de-escalate the situation before it's, spiraled completely out of control. But his attempts at reconciliation were not successful. The feud became the feud between the families, combined with Tosh's emotional response to the insults, and the ensuing legal battles made it increasingly difficult for Beppo to intervene. So Beppo, the principal, too, was deeply disappointed by the turn of events and the collapse of the democratic tradition at the school. So as a result of the growing tension and the lack of resolution, the school's management decided to suspend the democratic process, which had previously allowed students to take part in the election of prefects. So, amid this chaos, Beppo was also grappling with the looming departure from the country. He has not traveled yet. He's still he has decided to travel abroad to meet the wife and children, but he's still, preparing. So, he's also grappling with this looming departures from the country. He had been planning to relocate, and the legal action instituted by Chief Oba was nearing its conclusion. Still, Beppo hoped that an out of court settlement could be reached before he left. So, however, he was deeply concerned about the fate of one particular initiative that had been close to his heart. That's the school's invention club, specifically the bread project. This innovation or innovative initiative aimed to create a phone using recycled materials such as chips and panels. The project had gained attention from both the media and a local NGO called Life Grid. which had committed funding to help bring the project to fruition. Beppo, although not a scientist, had become an active supporter and patron of the club, arguing that invention transcended academic disciplines. He believed that the project had the potential to make a significant impact on both the students involved and the broader community. So, Beppo had watched with pride as the Breath project garnered interest from various sectors, and he had envisioned a future where the students could proudly announce that they had manufactured a phone, marking a significant achievement for the school. But because his departure was imminent, Beppo grew increasingly worried about what would happen to the project without his support and involvement. He feared that without his guidance, the project might falter or lose momentum self. But nevertheless, Beppo remained hopeful that the initiative could continue, and so he expressed a strong desire to return from London, if necessary, to be part of the eventual launch. His hopes, were pinned on the idea that the project could still succeed, despite the turmoil surrounding the school and the suspension of its democratic practices. In chapter 9, we see that apart from Stardom School allowing students to participate in politics, they also had a long standing tradition of organizing educational excursions that aimed to broaden the horizons of its students. Over the course of the past decade, the school had made multiple trips to Badagry, which is a historical town in Lagos State. Each time, they provide its students with invaluable cultural and historical knowledge. In addition to these, in addition to the excursions, the school also arranged retreats and trips for teachers and staff to destinations like Whispering Palms Resort, blending both relaxation and professional development. For the students, these excursions were integral to their learning experience and included visits to renowned historical sites, landmarks, and culturally significant locations. The school's management, while not without its criticisms, had earned recognition for its, consistent efforts to give students great exposure, making learning more engaging and exciting. This was reflected in the various special events and celebrations Stardom schools held throughout the year, such as Children's Day, Mother's Day, and Teacher's Day. The school also organized parties, concerts, and lectures featuring experts from various fields, sometimes taking students outside Lagos to experience new environments and ideas. Beppo, the principal of Stardom Schools for over 2 decades, played a pivotal role in the establishment of the school's robust excursion program. His philosophy centered on the idea that excursions were not merely about having fun or enjoying a break from schoolwork. They were about creating a deep connection between the students and the country in which they lived. Beppo believed that many of the students came from elite families that would eventually send them abroad for further studies. Thus, he sought to, immerse them in Nigeria's rich culture, history, and geography during their time at Stardom, ensuring that they had a strong sense of national identity before venturing into the global stage. He believed this would help the students foster a lasting connection to their homeland, even if they never returned after staying abroad. Now, in line with this philosophy, Beppo successfully persuaded the school management to institute a tradition of organizing an excursion that each time to various places of attraction within Nigeria. Over the years, students of Stardom visited iconic sites such as um, Ikogosi Warm Springs in Ekiti State, the Erin Ijesha Waterfalls in Osun State, and the Owo Waterfalls in Kwara State, which is the highest waterfall in West Africa, by the way. So they also visited the Gurara Falls in Niger State, and other significant natural landmarks. These sites, with their stunning landscapes and unique cultural stories, provided students with both educational and emotional experiences. So the Ikogosi Warm Springs, for example, had a captivating background or backstory involving Reverend John S. McGee, who, despite local superstitions warning against visiting the springs, recognized its potential for good use and later contributed to its development. Stardom School's excursions were not just limited to natural wonders. They also included visits to places of historical and cultural significance. The school organized trips to places such as the Yankari Games Reserves in Bauchi, the National War Museum in Umuahia, and the Hanging Lake in Ado, Awaye, Oyo State. They also explored the Kanu Palace and Oni of Ife Palace and the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, among others. So Beppo, the principal, believed in exposing students to the diversity of Nigerian culture and history, which was evident in the school's participation in major national festivals like the Calabar Carnival, Oshun Oshobo Festival, and Agungu Festival in Kebbi. So, in addition to the national sites, Stardom schools made an effort to ensure that students had a well-rounded understanding of their own city, Lagos. So, Beppo, the principal, encouraged excursions to places such as the National Theatre, which is at the Iganmo, the National Museum, the Muson Center, and the City Mall in Onikom, and the Lagos State University of Ojo, or in Ojo. Students also visited several major corporations such as Chevron, Shell, UBA, First Bank, and Globacom, among others. These excursions gave students a taste of both high-class environments like Banana Island and Snake Island and underprivileged areas like Mushin, Ajegunle, and Ijora. In these contrasting settings, Beppo used real-life examples to teach the students important life lessons. For instance, when they visited Ajegunle, a poverty-stricken area, Beppo reminded the students that being born in such a place did not determine their future. He encouraged them to focus on education and harness their talents, as many successful people, such as soccer stars like Odion Igalo and Victor Osimhen, had come from similar backgrounds. Beppo's commitment to educating through adventure extended beyond mere sightseeing. He believed in the power of experiential learning, so the school visited places like Yaba Psychiatric Hospital, where students were educated um, um, on the dangers of drug abuse, and also the Oyasa Foundation House, which houses an extensive collection of African artwork. Other notable trips included visits to the Lagos Blue Rail Mega Station and the Iju Water Works, which provided students with first-hand knowledge of infrastructure and technology. One of the most memorable excursions for the students was a trip to Badagry, a town that played a significant role in Nigeria's history due to its involvement in the slave trade. Students explored the Black Heritage Museum, where they learned about the brutal history of slavery and the suffering endured by millions of Africans who were captured and transported to the Americas. Beppo, deeply moved by the experience, reflected on the painful history of slavery and how it still reverberated in the present day. He questioned how modern Nigerians, particularly those seeking to escape their current circumstances by migrating abroad, were becoming part of a new form of enslavement. He noted how many Nigerians were willing to abandon everything they had worked for in search of better opportunities abroad, often ending up in low paying menial jobs. This, to him, represented a tragic paradox, a form of voluntary slavery. So, Beppo's emotional reflection on this issue spoke to the deeper themes of his educational philosophy. He wanted to inspire students to look beyond immediate opportunities and gain a broader perspective on their country's history and future. He hoped that his students would leave stardom with a sense of pride in their heritage and a strong desire to make a positive impact on their country, regardless of where their paths in life led them. So the excursions, though enjoyable and adventurous, were ultimately about fostering an enduring love and understanding of Nigeria, preparing students to become well rounded, socially conscious individuals who would continue to contribute to their society even as they ventured into the wider world. Chapter 10 brings us back to Beppo's travel plans as the book tries to come to an end. So, Beppo had never been particularly eager to relocate abroad. You can remember that. And as a result, he hadn't prioritized renewing his passport. It expired 2 years earlier, and despite initial thoughts of contacting an immigration office in Lagos, in Ikoyi district, to alert them, he ultimately did not take action. When COVID 19 started or arrived, any thoughts of passport renewal were sidelined. So even after the pandemic had passed, the lingering stories of complicated new rules and unnecessary hurdles discouraged him from proceeding with the renewal. He was not among the first to visit the passport office, and when he tried to go online to initiate the process, his efforts were unsuccessful. By early 2022, the pressure from his family to travel became too much to ignore, and getting his passport renewed became an urgent necessity. However, the ongoing Japa syndrome, with many Nigerians seeking to leave the country, had created long queues at every passport office, particularly in Lagos. Beppo was discouraged by the overwhelming crowds and the idea of waiting in long lines or having to deal with the unhelpful officials. So, desperate to avoid wasting time, he considered other options. One such option was to offer a bribe to an agent or an immigration officer, hoping to expedite the renewal process. He was told that by paying around 200,000 to 250,000, he could get the passport renewed within a month, or even faster if he paid more. Another alternative was to travel to nearby states like Ogun, Oyo, Oshun, or Kwara, where the passport offices were less crowded. After considering the options, Beppo decided to head to Ibadan, the capital of Oyo State, after receiving contact details for an agent who could help speed up the process. Despite the government's claims that the middlemen had, been outlawed, Beppo found that the agent in Ibadan named Tai was closely connected to the immigration service. Tai explained that while the law existed on paper, it was rarely enforced in practice. He offered Beppo a 10-year renewal for 100,000 instead of the official 70,000, promising that the extra charge would expedite um, the data capturing process. To further speed things up, Tai suggested an additional 20,000 to fast track the collection of the passport after approval. Beppo set out for Ibadan the next afternoon, hoping to arrive early for the scheduled 7 a.m. appointment. That's the following day. He chose to travel by public bus, concerned about security along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, where there had been reports of kidnappings. So commercial drivers, however, were more familiar with the area, and he felt more comfortable traveling by bus despite the risk of banditry that plagued the region. The trip was a pleasant surprise as the newly reconstructed road allowed Beppo to reach Ibadan in under an hour. Wow. Compared to the long, grueling journey he remembered from years ago. Along the way, Beppo observed the growing development along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, noting the many religious institutions and new business ventures along the route. He found himself reflecting on Nigeria's religious landscape and the irony of the country having so many religious institutions, but relatively few truly godly people. He also admired the expanding industrial and commercial presence, especially in Ogun State, which had benefited from the growing number of businesses along the road. Beppo recalled his earlier visit to Ibadan with his students, explaining the city's political and cultural significance, such as being home to Nigeria's first university and television station. The next morning, Beppo arrived at the Agodi Immigration Office in Ibadan at 6:40 a.m., well ahead of his 7 a.m. appointment. Despite his initial worries about being late, he was able to reach the office on time thanks to the relatively smooth commute, a stark contrast to the traffic jams often encountered in Lagos. However, when he tried to enter the office, he was stopped by security guards who asked him to phone Tai to verify his appointment. Tai directed him to a nearby business center rather than allowing him to enter the premises. It turned out that Tai was not an immigration official but an agent operating in cooperation with immigration staff. Tai had Beppo pay Tai had Beppo pay the 100,000 fee and filled in the necessary details for the passport renewal. He also verified Beppo's national identity number (NIN), which turned out to have an issue that required Beppo to visit the NIN office for validation. After Tai handed over the paperwork to an immigration official, Beppo was told to return for data capturing in 3 weeks, though the entire process had taken less than 2 hours. Beppo was relieved that it wasn't as drawn out as he had feared. However, Beppo's experience wasn't without its setbacks. At the NIN office, he encountered frustrating network glitches that caused further delays. Despite his best efforts to expedite the process, Beppo was left waiting for 3 more weeks for the NIN validation. Now, this risked causing him to miss his travel date. So, while he had hoped that paying extra to Tai and walking through the agent would allow him to bypass the usual bureaucratic hurdles, the reality was that he was still at the mercy of Nigeria's often unreliable and slow systems. In chapter 11, Beppo is still preparing to travel abroad. So, the school in which he is principal, Stardom Schools, has prepared a farewell ceremony for him. The farewell ceremony was an emotional and festive tribute to Beppo. There was a vibrant, eye-catching 3D banner stretched across the entire wall of the main hall, with the school signature purple and black colors setting the scene for a grand event. Dominating the banner was a large image of Beppo laughing gracefully, underscored with the words, "For he gave stardom his very best." Beneath that, the subtitle read, "Memorable Farewell for a Most Committed Principal." It was on this day that many learned for the first time that the name Beppo was a shortened form of Adebeppo, which had been kept private for all those years. So Beppo is short form for what? Adebeppo. Though the departure of Beppo had been the subject of much confusion and debate among the school community, the reality of his leaving had finally been accepted by all. A minor twist to the plan was that Beppo had agreed to change his departure date in exchange for a $100 fine, a sum that the school cheerfully covered as part of the farewell arrangements. With the decision settled, the farewell events began in full swing, beginning with a novelty football match between the students and the staff. The game, refereed by the games master, Mr. Ibe, was filled with humor and light-hearted moments. Every time the students got close to scoring, Mr. Ibe would blow his whistle for a mysterious foul, much to the frustration of the players. The match took on a comic tone when the staff's second goal was awarded via a penalty that had been taken 5 times before one of the staff members managed to score. Despite the odd officiating, the match was filled with laughter and um, camaraderie. Now, the players also danced and sang around Beppo after the final whistle, celebrating his contributions to the school. The next day, that was Thursday, there was a spirited debate held in Beppo's honor on the topic of whether the arts had contributed more to the development of the country than the sciences. The opposing teams, with the SS1 students defending the importance of the sciences and the SS2 students advocating for the arts, presented compelling arguments. The arts advocates brought up the example of the Nobel Prize in Literature, won by Nigeria's Professor Wole Soyinka in 1986, arguing that Nigeria's cultural exports had made a more profound impact than scientific achievements. The debate ended with the SS3 students winning, but Beppo was moved by the impressive arguments and the confiding delivery from both sides. The debate was not only an educational experience, but also a reflection of Beppo's belief in nurturing the intellectual growth of his students. As he had often, emphasized the importance of humor and creativity in public speaking. On Friday afternoon, as the next day, Stardom's weekly socio-cultural activities from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. were dedicated to the grand finale of Beppo's farewell. The choral group kicked off the event with an inspirational performance, followed by a series of comedy skits by the drama club. The skits humorously depicted Beppo's well-known sayings such as, "Other things being equal," and "If you say education is too expensive, try ignorance." The students even mimicked his distinctive pronunciation of principle. This playful imitation brought laughter, but also highlighted the deep bond between Beppo and the students. The performance segued into a stunning display of Nigerian cultural dances. The drama club included the energetic Yoruba bata dance, the acrobatic Igbo atilogu, and the synchronized koroso, a popular Hausa dance. The students, unable to obtain the traditional instruments, used Jamb drums to, accompany the dances, which only added to the charm of the performances. Beppo who was always an advocate for promoting Nigerian culture, was delighted to see how much the students had embraced and, internalized the richness of their heritage. But the most emotional moment came during the Kenu dance of the Badagry people. This dance, which Beppo had introduced to the students after attending a performance by the national troupe at the National Theatre in Lagos, holds special significance for him. The dance, which depicts travelers in a canoe floating on a river, reminded Beppo of his experiences in Badagry, where he had been deeply moved by the history of slavery. Now, as the dance progressed, Beppo's thoughts transported him to the Heritage Slavery Museum, where he had witnessed the brutalities inflicted on slaves. The imagery of whips and blood brought him to a boiling point, and before he knew it, he found himself shouting out, "No!" The audience, startled by his outburst, fell into a stunned silence. Realizing his sleep, Beppo quickly improvised, explaining that no school could have done the canoe dance better than Stardom, and the audience erupted in applause. The performers picked up where they left off, and the drummers resumed their rhythm. It was a fleeting moment of tension, but one that underscored the deep emotional connection Beppo had to both the school and Nigeria culture. In her speech, Mrs. Ibedun Gloss, the managing director of Stardom, expressed heartfelt gratitude to Beppo for his unparalleled contributions to the school's growth. She recalled how Beppo had first her late met her late father, Chief David Aje, 24 years ago, and how, despite initial delays in his start date, he had proven himself to be a dedicated and exceptional teacher. Over the years, Beppo's commitment had been integral to the school's success, and Mrs. Gloss spoke with admiration about his passion, competence, and ability to connect with both students and parents. She acknowledged that while Beppo's departure would be a huge loss to Stardom, she hoped his future endeavors would continue to benefit both him and the school. She also encouraged him to maintain a connection between his new school in the UK and Stardom. As a token of appreciation, Mrs. Gloss presented Beppo with a generous farewell gift, a $10,000 check, the largest the school had ever given to a departing staff member. The audience erupted in applause, and Beppo, deeply moved, stepped forward to accept the gift. The MD's playful remark about the school's gift being not cash, not raw dollars, lightened the mood, but the genuine emotion in the room was palpable. As Pebble took the microphone to speak, the audience quieted in anticipation. Overcome with emotion, Beppo struggled to find the right words. His voice faltered, and tears began to flow as he acknowledged the enormity of the moment. The crowd recognized the significance of the farewell, stood in solidarity with him. Mrs. Gloss gently intervened, offering a round of applause for Beppo's emotional farewell, as the audience joined in to honor him. In a room filled with handkerchiefs and teary eyes, Beppo's departure became not just a personal farewell, but a shared moment of recognition for the years of dedication he had given to Stardom schools. The ceremony ended with Beppo embracing the deep emotional bonds he had formed over 2 decades. As the photographers clicked away, capturing the historic moment, everyone in the room knew that although Beppo's time at Stardom had come to an end, his legacy would live on in the hearts and minds of all who had been part of the Stardom community. The students, teachers, and staff stood united in their appreciation for the man who had given them his very best. So, in the final chapter 12, Beppo's journey to bid farewell to his cherished role at Stardom Schools and begin a new chapter overseas was filled with a mix of determination, nostalgia, and unexpected emotional twists. Having learned from a previous travel mishap years earlier, when a simple oversight led to missing a flight and paying a penalty, Beppo was resolute about arriving at the airport early this time. His flight was scheduled for 10 p.m., and by 3 p.m., he was ready to leave his Ikeja home, far earlier than he might have in the past. His preparations were interrupted by a visit from his landlord, Mr. Ogunwale, flanked by his family, who had come to see him off. Beppo's relationship with the Ogunwales had transcended the typical tenant-landlord dynamic. They regarded him as family. Despite his initial reluctance, Beppo allowed Mr. Ogunwale to drive him to the airport, accompanied by the two grandchildren. Jide, and Kemi. Take note of all these names. Jide and Kemi were the two grandchildren of Bebo's landlord in Nigeria, and the landlord was Mr. Ogunwale. Okay, their innocent chatter about Japa now. Does you still remember what Japa is? Japa is a term for migration. That's leaving Nigeria to go abroad and find better life. And their playful plea to join them in London brought a bittersweet smile to Beppo's face. He had grown particularly close to Jide over the past year, coaching him on weekends in elocution and African history. Leaving the boy behind stirred guilt in Beppo, who knew their sessions had fostered a unique bond. Before leaving, Beppo reflected on the life he was leaving behind. His wife had urged him to pack light, and though he managed to avoid carrying excessive traditional food items, his luggage was still filled with books and essentials. He had sold his Pathfinder SUV and gifted some of his belongings to his landlord's family, further deepening their connection. As they sat out, Beppo received a surprise call from the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Ape, and two other colleagues who wanted to escort him to the airport. Their gesture touched him, highlighting the respect and admiration he had garnered over the years at Stardom. The envoy reached the bustling Murtala Mohammed International Airport by 4:07 p.m. The reality of his departure began to sink in when he saw the word "departures" boldly written on the building. Emotions overwhelmed him, and as he bid farewell to his landlord and the children, he handed them a cash gift, much to their delight. The Stardom staff accompanied him through the check-in process, lightening the mood with humor and shared memories. Yet, as the evening wore on, they too had to leave, returning home to their own routines, while Beppo moved closer to his new reality. After successfully checking in and receiving his boarding pass, Beppo found a quiet moment to reflect. Sitting at the gate, he fell into a restless sleep and was transported into a vivid, harrowing dream. He was at the Heritage Slave Museum in Badagry, surrounded by relics of slavery. He witnessed the unimaginable torment of enslaved Africans, chains, whips, and cruel branding. In the dream, he was ordered by a white man to board a ship filled with captives. With a surge of defiance, he screamed, "No!" awakening to find an airline official gently shaking him. Disoriented, Beppo struggled to separate the dream from reality as onlookers and security personnel urged him to board. At 10:45 p.m., the plane finally took off. As it ascended, Beppo sat in quiet contemplation, torn between excitement for the future and the weight of leaving behind a community he deeply loved. By Monday, the void left by Beppo was palpable at Stardom schools. Known for his warmth, humor, and leadership, he was a central figure, greeting students at the gates and inspiring them during assemblies. The absence of his presence during the morning routine cast a somber mood over the school. The vice principal, Mrs. Ape, attempted to fill his shoes, but the students couldn't hide their disappointment. Even the managing director, Mrs. Ibidapo Gloss, tried Ibidum Gloss, tried to assure them that a new principal would soon take over, but the promise failed to lift their spirits. So, just as the atmosphere seemed unbearably heavy, a cry of "Principal" erupted at the school gate. To everyone's astonishment, Beppo stood there, arms wide open, grinning from ear to ear. The students rushed to him, cheering, and lifting him onto their shoulders. "I'm back," he shouted, tears of joy streaming down his face. "I didn't go. My heart is here. This is where I belong." The students were so happy that they couldn't even wait anymore. Even when Mr. Beppo was still talking, nobody could hear his voice again because the student had started singing the school's victory song. "We are stars, we are stars, we are stars of stardom. We are stars, we are always winning. We are stars and we have won. No night so dark, no cloud so mean, yet stardom schools will win." That is the end of the novel, The Lekki Headmaster. So you see at the end, Beppo's love and passion for his job, his calling, was more than any other decision. So his departure had been a test, but his heart had led him back to where he truly belonged. So that was just a narration. I just narrated the novel to you. Okay? So you still need to read in depth, but with this narration, you can understand the whole text and answer questions. So in my next videos, I'm going to give you questions, ask questions, and see if you can answer them and further prepare you for the exam. But remember to share this video to others who are going to write this exam and others also who would like to read this text and enjoy it. Also remember to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can get more enriching educational educational content from us. Remember, WAEC is starting soon, so we're going to be posting lessons that will help you pass WAEC. The former WAEC said they had so much positive words to describe this page because it helped them a lot in passing their exams. So don't be left out. Share this page, share this video to others who have exams, and let them all partake in the good things that we are doing for our students. Thank you, and God bless you.